Pedro Dias. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ernesto. It's a pleasure to be here.
You worked in Google search quality team. How did that change the way that you do work today?
A lot, I would say. So yeah, to start with, like, it's been more time that I left Google than I've been at Google. I left Google in end of 2011, so like around Penguin, if you like to put a mark with algorithms. And the time I was there for almost 6 years, and I was part of the search quality / spam fighting team. And because I'm Portuguese native from Portugal, I was responsible and the person responsible for the policies for the spam around for the Portuguese language market. This obviously means that, it's just because I was the person responsible for the Portuguese speaking language market. It also means like you kind of liaise with other languages and your colleagues to draft policies and see what's sensible for a language and a market. Nobody at Google defines what is quality or what is spam single-handedly or alone. There is always like a sort of call, like a committee of people that discuss what are the tactics and the approaches and the intents and how the markets behave, and just all the aspects that sometimes are not even like considered by whomever looks at search results. Like in some markets, for example, you don't tackle certain kinds of flow quality because the corpus of overall content is so little that if you remove it, like it's just the only content that it's there sometimes. Or if a vertical is way too competitive, sometimes doesn't justify the effort because you remove something and the next best thing is also like spam. So you end up like tackling the whole, like if you go into like gambling or adult markets, kind of it's a very kind of harsh, and sometimes these are better dealt like algorithmically, so to speak, than kind of you go in on a manual action basis. So I'm already kind of drifting off. So yeah. So in a nutshell, I hope I kind of answered your question, and I'll give you back the ball.
No, I got that. So can you describe a little bit of what you were doing? Like what you were doing, like were you actively trying to find spam? Were you actively trying to improve search results in some way? Like it's sort of the same thing, like it doesn't matter how you attack it, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
So what you do depends on your seniority there, your knowledge, your market expertise. You start by, when you enter, you are at a very low level in the search quality team. So you enter, and your task is, I mean, in my time and that during that time was a very kind of repetitive work, so to speak. So you have like a queue of websites that you need to look at, and they are based on kind of some algorithmic criteria that triggered a review. So either the algorithms that dictate quality are not confident enough on making a decision on what the website is or what it should kind of cater for, or the intents around it. And the algorithms kind of trigger, like, I'm not certain about something, I want a human to make a judgment. So the website comes into a queue and you review the website, and you make the decisions that you need to make according to the criteria that is presented to you. So it's mostly like, as you can see, like and you can see like people would review like large quantities of sites on a daily basis. Cannot go into specifics, but just leave it at that. Then as you progress and as you become like more acquainted with everything, and you learn about the web, and if you need to learn more, and if you need like to expand your horizons, um, you start to go into more um, looking at search results on your own. Like you're not depending on a queue anymore. So you know like which queries to look at. You you have like other systems to tap into to see the level of satisfaction with the search results, and which kind of queries are more like troublesome to say, and kind of um, go after this kind of thing yourself, kind of debugging the quality of the search queries according to the thresholds that they present. So there are ways that you can see this at Google, how things are presented to you, that you can choose what you want to go after depending on the how bad it is. Um, then there's also like um, when you are at more senior levels, you kind of also tap into like spam reports that people kind of that are flagged, that should be like trustworthy to go and be looked at. And you do like more like investigative kind of work, and that's where kind of people go after like link networks and um, whole like spam corpuses of content farms and stuff like this. So it's more like you start with a lead, and you start pulling the thread and following the hints until you reach like you paint the whole scenario, and then you kind of hash it all at once. Um, so kind of this is like yeah, it's like an implosion, and then you can tackle it on your own, like in terms of like this, is this like a one-off thing? Is this something that needs to be automated? Is this something that needs to be fed into an algorithmic kind of solution? The approaches depend on what the behavior um, goes against or goes in line with, and the needs of the market, so to speak. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what you do there. Obviously, there's like I learned a lot when I went to Google. Kind of my world kind of exploded literally, like not literally, but I mean almost literally. Like my 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 universe was Lisbon, the end of the street. Yeah. When I went to Google, you have the view of the whole web, almost literally the view of the whole web. You see how trends emerge, where they go. You have contact with everyone and everywhere. You can speak with everyone and learn things that you never dreamed dreamt of learning. So you kind of, my conception of the web and scale kind of like, were completely like remodeled harshly. So kind of, you learn a lot of things that you didn't know before. And I was, I studied to be a web developer, like graphic designer, like web designer, which was like back in the 2000s. That's what I've, graduated with. So I had studied around things around like usability and information architecture and web accessibility, because this was all part of good practices of website development and web design, so to speak. So there was like a lot of pieces in place on my criteria that what kind of makes the web, kind of why the things happen the way they happen on the web, and what users kind of search for because of all these more humane kind of disciplines. So I had quite a good basis. I was probably lucky to start with that basis, then and then go into this search engine world, which is like you know trying to bridge the gap between humans and the machine. Kind of, it's always like um, gives you a good balance, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's pretty clear that there's a catching up game, right? Like
Yeah,
the beginning, the algorithms
definitely.
were capable of doing so much that than a human. It would notice things, and then I guess over time they're catching up, and
Mhm.
every time they're trying to make progress in that direction, whether they get it right or not. But it's pretty clear where they're going. You mentioned that. So you went. There was some investigation going on, but some things were already picked up, like algorithmically and things like that. I'm I'm pretty sure you can't go into a lot of detail. That's fine. But if you could, if you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned link farms and content farms. So is it fair to say that spam comes in many ways? Like it can be links, it can be content,
Definitely.
maybe it can be scale of any of those, even if they maybe on their own they don't meet a certain threshold, but maybe at scale they do. Like, can you talk a little bit more about, because it's so hard in SEO to define things. Everyone has their own definition of words. Um, so what the basic word
Yeah,
of what is spam, it's not quite clear exactly what it is. Maybe it's just many different things.
and that's natural because often from observation, what I see is that people look at the end result and they try to judge what it is based on what they see, instead of judging what it is based on the intent behind it. And to understand the intent behind it, you need to put two things together. You need to put together what it looks like and what is presented and what the intent that it tries to cater, and then bridge somehow with your intuition what is the intent that was behind the person that created that, with that look and that content toward it. They have an intent to push something towards somewhere, right? And so if you just judge something in isolation, um, it's very hard to define what is, if it's spam or, I mean, some things are quite clear, like if it's like gibberish or kind of, things like jumbled together. And sometimes it isn't. Sometimes I've came across cases where my first instinct was this is spam. And then upon closer inspection, you just realize that it's some quirk that made the website work badly in certain way and kind of, make the thing kind of break. And there is like no actually intent of manipulation behind it. Um, this, unfortunately, this judgment on intent and what's the what's the objective, it's something that you cannot learn in terms of, you cannot do a, like a you learn by doing, you learn by seeing so many cases that you build your intuition on that. It's not something that you just like read something and you come off immediately understanding with a full understand and complete understanding of what spam is. Even I can say that even with 6, 10 years of experience in search, there were some cases that people were kind of conflicted with. And that's why I told you in the beginning that nobody at Google defines anything on their own. There is also always a committee, because the the fact that there are these complexities and edge cases means that you need to have discussions with people that also have like a developed intuition, so then you can like refine your judgment more and more and more towards, the potential ramifications of your decision, what this implies for the market. Is this something that's worth tackling? All of this encompassed. It's more complex than people realize. It's not like, oh, this is spam, then kill it. It's not as there are many cases which are black and white like that, yes, but um, as as the systems evolve and people get more spammers or get more refined, the judgment also needs to be more refined to catch them. So there is always this like, evolution from both sides, where the decision depends heavily sometimes on an analysis, and that sometimes I can say that in isolation something might look very good and not be spam, But then if I encounter from the same guy from the same network 500 other examples that are repetitive and have a certain behavior, then with that extra information, I can change my judgment. And suddenly, something that in isolation would not be spam, in conjunction with some other factors, becomes spam because the intent shifts and the intent behind what the person aims to achieve with what they are doing. So yeah, it's never like a black and white situation. Rarely is.
It's quite interesting. And how would you know if it's the same person? Like is that as simple as sharing Search Console, or do you look at hosting stuff? Like, is there a way that you
Mhm.
like? How can you
I
know?
cannot
Because
go
sometimes
into the
it's
specifics on
oh, that's
that.
fine.
I cannot go
Um,
into the specifics on that, but um, you can fingerprint. Let's leave it at that. You can
okay.
fingerprint a lot of things, right? There are a lot of traits and characteristics of making a website that when you make it, um, because you are human, you are limited to certain aspects of making things look different. So unless you are like even not even machines, like even AI now, AI kind of is good at patterns. It's more refined at patterns than humans. So that's why AI can see patterns where humans probably couldn't, right? Because you could argue that one of the main benefits of AI is like understanding data and look at patterns that otherwise we would miss them because as humans, we are limited in that way. So, but even with AI, I've noticed because I use it every day. Um, it resorts to patterns to do things, and you can say I can make 2 or 3 websites that are very different from each other. Yeah, 2 or 3, yes. When it becomes 10, 20, 100, that's very difficult. And as the scale goes up, so goes the pattern up. So um, when I say a person, I don't mean like a physical person. It can be like a business, can be what I want to say is that there is definitely um, unified intent behind that corpus. If that's one person, if that's 2 persons, if that's 3, if that's a business, 2 businesses, what you judge like is the common denominator. And if the common denominator is strong enough to take an action, justifies, then that's it.
Although it's like because the edge cases, those are probably the hardest ones because that's evolving, right? Um, but maybe there are black and white ones. Can you, would you be able to go into like some examples of what is clearly spam? Like you mentioned one um, where you saw this gibberish text, or and you realized, oh, it was a mistake, but that was sort of flagged, right? Is there
Yeah.
something else like that that can be happening? That is like, yeah, this seems like unless you do further investigation and you realize for some reason it wasn't, it's very clear that is spam. Like, can you tell about examples that you saw?
Effort. So one of the dead giveaways is always like low effort, high monetization intent. When these two things kind of come together, low effort and high monetization intent often signals towards something wrong because the intent in there is to monetize something that gives little work to do, right? So if that's the primary trait that your eye catches up to, like you go into a website and suddenly everything feels very low effort, um, very bare bones, but there are like a lot of ads everywhere, a lot of affiliate links everywhere, a lot of things placed here and there to try to monetize the shallowness of the effort that was put into it. So that's a dead giveaway. And sometimes with 2 or 3 years, anyone in search quality would bat an eye on a site, and without even doing anything, navigating to other pages, I could say, this is going to be spam. And 99.99999% of the times I would be right. Yeah. And the 0.00001% is there to be caught by peers that would kind of, revise my decisions. Because like I said, even if I apply a manual action to a website, and depending on the combination and types of manual actions that I'm going to apply to it, I would not kind of unilaterally push it to production without someone else like reviewing it, and vice versa. I would have to review decisions made by other people to vet them so they go into production. So yeah, in a nutshell, so like old school things like large amounts of repetitive text, like hidden bit behind like some kind of JavaScript kind of thing, or JavaScript redirect that hides like keyword stuffing, or all this. But that what makes spam, again, it's not the technicality itself, it's the intent behind it. And that's where I'm going, because you can a lot of people have, even 2026, right? If you speak about cloaking or serving content to bots and to people, the default thought and the default behavior of any SEO, 99% of the SEO is going to be, this is cloaking, Google is going to penalize you, right? But that's not necessarily the case. You can do geolocalized content, like I need to serve a certain kind of content to people in Spain and a different kind to people in Germany and a different kind of content to people in the US on the same page. But Google always crawls from the US. So then you are at odds with, what do I do for Google, right? Because Google will not see the content that you geolocate to people in non-US countries. There is a parenthesis here, obviously, because despite Google always crawling from the US, Google can temporarily lease servers in specific locations to do spot checks. So Google decides, I'm going to spot check this website from Germany and see if the content matches with what the US sees. Or I'm going to spot check this website from whatever and see. So Google is always like, you can say that the bulk of the crawling is certainly done from the US and US data centers. There is some ad hoc crawl that will be done from these leased servers everywhere around the globe, just to make sure, to match, to make sure that Google is seeing the right content that users see, because what Google wants is to see the same content that any user anywhere would see, right? Like what cloaking, and the bad part of cloaking is that you would always serve something to Google that is specific to Google. Nobody else would see it, just Google. And then everyone else around the globe, even people in the US, would not see this content. Just Google would see this content. That's what the bad part of cloaking is, because you are treating Google as an individual person, kind of a specific case, not even like an individual person. Like you are treating Google as just for Google. I want Google to rank my site just based on what I show it to, and not what people actually see. That's the dangerous part of cloaking. And that's what's quickly can derail into manipulative tactics, because then you go like, so why don't we show just like this much more text to Google than we show to people? Because people don't like to read text, so we want like videos and images on our website, but we don't want text. But because of Google, we have to show a lot of text, so we're not good. We are just going to show it to Google, not to people. That starts to be on the manipulative side of things. It's might be the case that it's, in some, again, there you go, edge cases where these kind of, end up not being egregious enough to be kind of considered spam or manipulation. But, there's a good chance that it is. So, yeah, in a nutshell.
Like on that cloaking example, it's quite cool you brought it up. Some people, um, you would say it's a form of manipulation, but not but sort of indirect. Like some people, for example, hide certain parts of the website because it doesn't want Google getting into those things and maybe wasting crawl budget or something like that. And it wants to concentrate Google's signals into specific pages on the website and not everywhere. That might be helpful for humans, but for Google, it's really not. And
Yeah,
they might
faceted navigation.
they might use cloaking, but not faceted navigation, which maybe you can do with an on-click event that Google isn't going to interact.
Yeah.
Maybe they do it just by, we don't show the filters to Google. We do show it to users just to avoid Google from getting trapped somewhere. There's an intent there of you want your website to do better, but you're not deceiving, right? Like, do you think, in your opinion, if you were evaluating maybe like now, would you think that's sort of like a spammy manipulative tactic, or do you think that's sort of okay?
No, that's reverse cloaking. That's the opposite of cloaking. Like, cloaking is you show something just to Google and you don't show it to people. What you are saying here is that you show stuff to people that you wouldn't show to Google. It's the inverse of that.
Yeah.
So Google actually sees less things than people would see. The problem is always like, so again, we should not go in towards judging things in isolation, kind of technical behavior in isolation. This always needs to be judged together with intent behind it. And there are cases where, like the example that I was saying, like sometimes you want to show genuinely something different to, for example, things that are hidden behind like a hard to find elements, like, this has become like
Low
the
contrast.
cat and mouse. Yeah, kind of, So back in the day, people would hide large amounts of text behind invisible kind of layers, and they would hide it with JavaScript or CSS, and these things would never be things for people to interact with. So this was very blatant spam, right? Like if you hide a bunch of text that's just like keyword stuff, text behind some kind of JavaScript hidden stuff or some CSS, the intent is almost quite clear, right? And say almost because there will always be the 0.0001 cases where you have to judge it. But then some people, when I say people, some website developers or whomever you want to put behind the website started to create like accordion items or drop-down items that are really hard to spot. You have to really look at the website to find. You cannot say that it's hidden because look, there's an element for human interaction there. There's a close box. But it's really hard to find. It's like that close ad button that it's like right there in the corner of the ad, and you cannot almost tap it with your finger. It's really hard to hit. So this is like the cat and mouse game that you will have to judge based on like, is this made for people to interact with or is not made for people to interact with? Those are the things that you kind of need to consider. But more often than not, you'll be safe by saying, is the intent behind this manipulating my or gaining advantage in search by doing something that will just Google will understand and people will not, or people will not interact with? If the answer is yes, you probably should rethink it. If you just want to hide something, I want to hide this from people, Google will see it because it's in a drop down. but it's hidden from people. Is this like hidden content? Is it like cloaking? Probably not. If the intent is not manipulative, if you don't have the intention of deceiving or gaining unfair advantage, or you're just like trying to build together an interface and some things end up being hidden, that's fine. More often than not, that's fine. Again, if you say, I could say, oh, you can put things behind things as long as people can interact with. That's not going to be spam. This already gives edge for someone to kind of go off and say, oh, so if I kind of, put a lot of, there is a creative side of people, right? So that's why I always like say, there is never, and that is will never be a definitive answer, a black and white cut for what are you going to be penalized for, because there will always be that edge case that it's not, or the edge case that it is. And this depends on the intent, and again, the people behind this, what they are trying to accomplish, and a lot of other things. Because if you just judge things at face value, you are going to make mistakes, and you don't want to make mistakes.
You mentioned, like, I can't imagine what it's like to be there and saying, I'm going to put a manual action on this website or this collection of websites and things like that. I imagine not always there's a manual action, but maybe that finding translates into an algorithmic thing. Like, is that how that works? Like, is it, oh, we've found people are doing these things, maybe we want to see less of it or something, and sort of built into an algorithm? Like, how does that work?
So, first of all, there are manual actions and there are algorithmic. Not all the manual actions. Some manual actions are visible. Some manual actions might not be immediately visible. I mean, there were kinds of manual actions that probably wouldn't trigger message in Google Search Console. For example, Google has the ability to cut PageRank from a website. Your site no longer passes PageRank to any site on the web, right? They can choose to kind of issue a manual action and show it to you. But if they think that you are like a repeat offender or someone that they know that has a history of manipulation, rather than they going after you for every case that they penalize, because they know that the next case that you are going to do is also going to be probably like very much likely to manipulate. I'd rather like, do the work and not say to you that I did the work, right? And then you keep selling links, you keep buying links from that guy, and you're just, peddling in nothing, because the links that you sell or the links that you buy do not have any value because the page rank has been cut. Nobody knows except Google. And that's it.
They probably just sort of work until they don't, because there's a catch-up time, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. There's always a catch-up time. Google doesn't catch everything like at the time of birth. Like if a website is born today, there will be a catch-up time until Google realizes this is, and that's the nature. Like until it becomes big enough that it's causing damage, that's when Google starts caring. Because, for example, you can go after a lot of spam, but if the spam that you go after has no impact, meaning that is zero in traffic by some reason, or is already invisible, that's probably not the best use of your effort as a human person, because you should be prioritizing whatever is making a difference in terms of in the market, and rather like impacting real users. Like if it, like the saying, like if a tree falls in the forest, if you don't see it, did it really happen? Like, so if spam has no visibility, what do you benefit in going after it and killing it if it has no visibility already, right? You can argue, does it have no visibility because it hasn't grown? Does it have no visibility? No, it hasn't grown because the person who did it is unskilled. It has grown at what rate? There's a lot of things to evaluate in there. So yeah, never judge like the things that at face value you don't, and not everything is like um, tackle worthy or worthy of your efforts to be kind of, go after it.
Maybe this explains why some very old tactics that you would assume don't work, still you can see them around, like, like lorem ipsum pages ranking number
Yeah,
one, or white text on a white background pushing rankings to number one, or, pages that just have a title tag and it's empty, but the schema has all the content and that still ranks because the title tag made it indexable and then it got it from there. It seems like if those things, when I see them work, they always work for very maybe low volume pages, or like low volume terms, like just not that competitive. And maybe that's why, because there's just not a lot of damage there, or it's just not a widely enough practiced worth doing something about it. Um,
yeah.
on the other hand, my
Uh,
head is like, it should be easy to put like a lorem ipsum filter, but I don't know.
so it's tricky because, I call it the spammer's dilemma, go unnoticed, but be visible. Go unnoticed, but be visible. And I call this the spammer's dilemma because it's a dilemma that spammers live with. They want to be unnoticed, not they want to fly under the radar, but they want their websites to be visible. Um, so these are two things that are opposed in nature. You cannot go under the radar and be visible at the same time. There are the things that you perceive as a user that is having an impact. And then there are the real things that are having an impact that might be camouflaged by that tactic, which means that probably if the webmaster or whomever is responsible would take away that bad behavior, they would be visible the same way. So that thing is not giving any advantage. But because it's there, it's camouflaging kind of the whole thing. And as users usually that are external and do not have a view at the individual things that are contributing to this website kind of rising up, they will do the correlation, and that's why the correlations are dangerous, of judging that this is responsible for that. And so your way of connecting the dots might not be the you might not be connecting the dot to the accurate point that actually is making that website kind of be visible. You can There are a lot of times where people are right. There are a lot of times where people are wrong. i've I've had to deal with cases where people would complain directly to me when I would go to speak at conferences, and they would give me examples of websites that were doing this and this and that, and then I would look at the websites and say, you know they are, yes, doing something sketchy, but the sketchiness and the efforts that they are putting into this sketchiness isn't giving them any advantage. Now, I can do two things. I can apply a manual action to them um, in order to make them change their behavior, right? Because one of the purposes of a manual action can be to send a signal, because you want whomever made that decision to have an understanding that, hey, that's not okay. So go read the guidelines if you are not aware of them and don't repeat it. But then comes the part where some of them, some people will not care because that's their true purpose, is to manipulate. And that's where you start to go into the realms of the irrelevant to issue manual action. or do you just want to leave it alone because it's not doing anything? And because if you suddenly do a manual action, and if you signal to whomever is on the other side that whatever they are doing is not working anymore, you prompt them to do more of this bad work and repeat their bad behavior. Whereas if you leave it alone and let them believe that it's working, they have no need to go and repeat this somewhere else or do more of it. So that's that. You need to balance.
Yeah, everything seems to be such a massive balance.
It
Like
is. It's never. It's. It's like to just to tell you like sometimes even in cases where I would kind of really would like to penalize something, I would have to argue with my colleagues because some of them would defend that I shouldn't penalize this or that. And more often than not, the default behavior is always like leaning towards do not penalize, right? Because so we want to assume that people do not have bad intention as their first step, as their default behavior. So the default reasoning is always going to be, I need to justify why this is spam, not I need to justify why this is not spam, right? So um, the thing is like you cannot judge everything with a not everything is almost never a clear cut, almost never a clear cut. And that's where the majority of the things will fall is the almost never clear cut. There will be things that are clear cut. There are things that will be not clear cut, and they're just like there. And there will be the things that you'll be battling with sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months until you make a decision that something needs to be tackled. Um, and this is why sometimes you see spam going loose for a while. It can be that one, it has no visible threshold enough in the market to be tackled. And the people that are screaming about it, they are screaming about it because they are focused on that specific market, that specific niche. So they see it in isolation and to their interests. They don't see it in comparison to everything else. Whereas at Google, people will look at it and it will be in comparison to the whole corpus of everything else for that market and for that vertical. And it will not never be as niched as someone working on that website. So people get grudges as well, like if I see my competitor doing something, it's my competitor, it's my direct competitor. Like I have 4 or 5 competitors I can count like with my one hand. So it's really easy for me to get a grudge on someone. And suddenly if I'm patrolling them and I see that they're doing something that I do not like, I'm gonna report them and hope that Google penalizes them to my advantage, right? And then that's where the dangers come in, because if Google goes after every single report and buys people's grudges, then it's then it would be kind of a never-ending war. So whenever a report comes in, the default behavior is like I'm going to investigate the reported, but also I'm going to investigate the reporter, um, to make sure that I see both ends of the conversation, because you don't want to be held with just one end of the conversation, right? Um, you want to award merit where merit is due, and not just by someone's narrative or whether something is bad or not.
do you think when if you were doing this investigation work to try to going down a rabbit hole of a report or something, do you think people would consider now like what is done on different traffic sources? For example, let's say someone's doing quite a lot of spammy YouTube shorts or something, and they're sort of maybe driving traffic to a website or some like from a different traffic source, maybe like what would maybe considered social media traffic or something like that. But they're using that to boost maybe the website. It's clearly a manipulation. Do you think that the teams today are looking into that, or is it just within search itself, within Google itself, and because links are within pages on Google itself, content will be that thing, but social media content maybe is a little bit of a different thing. Like, do you think that like this a cross domain sort of check? Do you think that would always fall back to the same thing that you were saying about intent, or do you think that there's a boundary where the team might not be looking at?
The danger of that is that needs to be evaluated and in its own remit. So what I mean is, I'm not gonna judge the intent of a certain the website in search results based on what they are doing somewhere else. What needs to be done is that whomever is responsible for that place where the behavior is happening, they need to judge if this behavior is genuine, useful, or what's behind it. So if they are doing a lot of YouTube shorts, that's going to be evaluated by YouTube. That's going to be evaluated by whomever is on the spam team, the quality team on YouTube, and they are going to evaluate it from the standpoint, the person that is doing these shorts, are they contributing anything towards the value on YouTube? Is it worthy to keep on YouTube, right? If it's worthy, then it's not a problem that they are doing that. If that's creating something on their website and does not influence anything in search results, I don't have any business with that. That's a deal between the video and the website. It doesn't go through search, so it's not my business to judge whatever is happening there. There is no person except the search quality head of search quality overall that kind of has a say in the whole thing. Kind of there are policies and behaviors that are specific to products for a reason, because otherwise you end up with a mess and you don't make weighed decisions, and you do not apply your best judgment, because you need to evaluate these behaviors in isolation and not in how they compound with each other. Because I mean, like I said, if the videos are useful and they are good, then is there any merit in me penalizing the website because they are trying to influence the website? Like people who buy traffic, right? There are people who buy traffic to affiliate websites to send people there. That's a deal between two websites, the website selling the traffic and the website buying the traffic. It doesn't go through search. So I don't have a business in there. What starts to be concerning is then where that starts to influence search anywhere in the middle. Is there somewhere that they throw something into search to leverage? Or is there something of it that lands in search and triggers some kind of, bad result or bad behavior or low quality result? But then that needs to be judged in isolation on what's happening on this website, not what's happening outside of the website.
It's interesting. Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because there are people who, it seems virality impacts visibility. There seems to be
Indirectly,
people.
I would say yes. Not directly, I would say rarely. But if you think about it, what is virality? Virality is people reacting to a certain thing, right? You have a post, you have a social media thingy, and people are reacting to it. People are sharing it, right? Virality means that it's been shared, it's been reacted to. Certainly, yeah, you could agree with that.
I could agree with that, but you
Some
could also think about it as many visits at once to a website, whether through
How do you
direct
measure
traffic,
visits?
referred
Yeah,
traffic.
but virality doesn't the amount of visits don't just burst out of the ether, right? They come out of somewhere,
Yeah.
either
Yes.
because something has been posted somewhere on social media to drive that traffic
Someone is
or
clicking.
paid.
A lot of people are clicking
Yes,
something. Yeah.
and they are clicking or they are doing something with it, right? Now there are things that Google measure can measure and things that Google doesn't go into. Google only goes into the things that it can see in completion, right? So one of the things that Google can see in completion is mentions of a link somewhere, right? Google can see that this link is on this page, right? Or that this post of Twitter has been like quoted or shared, or this content on Twitter has been moving from user to user because Google can crawl Twitter, right? If Google stops being able to crawl Twitter, then Google will not see that content anymore. Now, things like likes and other more are often invisible to Google unless they trigger something else. Sometimes some likes might trigger, I don't know, like an RSS split into somewhere or some, what I want to say is that unless some action triggers a repetition of something that can be crawled by Google, it's unlikely to influence that the end result. So, and the thing that we need to probably to understand is, while a retweet clearly is a signal like that, it's a repetition, right? You are repeating, you are reposting something. A like is not, and well, if you restrict the like to that little reaction there, I don't know if the like will trigger something somewhere, like, in terms of the system, that I don't know if I give a like on Facebook, will there be some kind of, I don't know, some post method that will create a URL somewhere else and that
Yeah.
it will be crawled by Google, right?
Yeah.
So these are the caveats of people judging virality, where you need really to understand how the system is working to deal with the virality and what's the outcome of these interactions in the system. What do they create? Do they create something that can be visible to a search engine, or that in certain aspect will be crawlable? If it's crawlable, you can say that in certain part it will be seen, and Google wants to react to freshness somehow. Google has always like this instinct of, and this started with 9/11. If you remember, I was back in the day when 9/11 happened. Google didn't have this freshness concern. Things would kind of update in Google within like 1 or 2 months. And 9/11 happened, and for a couple of weeks or more, or months, people would search on Google for the news, and there was nothing there because Google wasn't updated. Google didn't have this freshness thing of updating. And that's why the freshness kind of became a concern, because Google started to understand that news breaking stories or things that are happening need to be kind of brought into search results as quickly as Google kind of understands that something is happening, because then you are going to search for it and you want to find it, right? You want to be aware that something is happening. So there is always this kind of freshness behavior. That's when caffeine was implemented. So caffeine is the first step of this freshness thing. There are things that need to be like Google needs to kind of, consider. So what I was going to say is that Google has always this instinct towards, oh, I need to check something that there's a buzz happening there. What is happening? What is happening? So Google is going to check. It's going to do a check. And the initial check is going to always be the default of, I want to have this, right? It's like that initial instinct, like, oh, something is new, I want to have it. And then you can start to have it. And then halfway, you realize that it's not what you thought it was. And then you start to apply your qualitative criteria to it. It's like you're seeing some really good food. You are really hungry. You see really like good food there. And I want to have it. And then you start having it and it doesn't taste as good as you thought it would. And then you start to say, you know what? No, I'm going to pass on. It's the same. It's the same approach. You are driven by an instinct of something that you do an initial judgment of something that you need to have because it's what you've been programmed to. And then as the qualitative criteria kicks in, then you start to say, maybe this is not what I thought it was. But then if it is, you can continue with confidently consuming it. And that's what makes New York Times the New York Times, and that's what makes sites that have high reputation their reputation, because Google acquires a certain level of trust, and then it knows that when something comes out of these sites, it's most likely good. It's like that restaurant that you go and you know that it's good every time you go there. So you tend to trust it and you recommend it and you go there every time because you don't expect bad things until someday that something bad happens and then you start to be like, but that's life. That's how things work for humans and for machines.
I heard you say on a podcast, it was quite interesting that you were sort of saying that Google has user signals and it has certain search results. And then if it does an update, for example, and it changes the search results, then it looks if the user behavior changes. And if it changes it or negative, maybe it knows, maybe we didn't get that update right. We got to switch it back to what it was. If it's positive, they'll probably stick with that. I found it so interesting, and I had a question popped up to mind right away. Like, do you know if this is sort of just like a machine learning thing, or is there a human involved in the sense that there's a trigger that says we think this was right or we think this was wrong, but we need it to be verified by a human? Or is it just, do you think there's no human involved and this is just sort of happening all the time, just purely with machine learning?
No, that is, so every change, either is like an algorithmic update or not. Think about every change to search is usually tested. And usually tested means that someone decides, I want to test this. So I'm gonna probably, and I'm speaking from my knowledge from back in the day. It's not probably, I don't know if it works like that anymore or not, but you could probably say like, I want to test this on a slice of this market for users that are logged in, for users that have this preference. So if you know that the slice of users that like photography and that are, in certain market, I'm going to make a change to images and see how they react, right? And then you can have a notion of how representative this data is in the corpus of Google. Now, what might happen is that you can run changes here and there in isolation and then try to bring it all together to make a decision if this change should be launched or not. Now, more often than not, the culmination of the results of these tests will be statistically significant enough to give you a confidence that this will be successful. What might happen is that sometimes, and this is me inferring, don't have any knowledge on this, but from understanding how the things work, is what might happen sometimes is that what someone or some machine deemed as representatives, significant, statistically representative for a few tests, when it's released to production and it spreads through the whole corpus of Google, might present a slight different scenario where the tests might not reflect accurately what it ends up being and the results that it ends up creating, either because some other changes were pushed along with it, because Google doesn't just push one single change in for each test that it does, like does a myriad of tests, then pushes all the changes, a batch of changes together. And sometimes because you tested something and these other changes were not live yet, you end up like with a different set of criteria than you would have ended up with, because that's how things work. And then you decide either probably to tweak it or to do something about it. Like, is this something that we can tweak and improve, or this is something really bad that we should probably not, just retract and rework and try again later. So that's the tricky part with algorithms and markets and being a global company, which is like you probably need to do a lot of tests and cater for a lot of changes. And sometimes when you are ready to launch, the data that you have from your tests will go live with other things that will probably also have can twist the final results of how this or that happens. So that's that.
In your work today, you do technical SEO, you do traffic drop analysis and content quality assessments, and you sort of help people to build and to become more visible, both in search and AI. When you're looking at a website, I'll try to not make this a really broad question because then it's impossible to answer, but you have a way of, like, for example, if you're looking at a traffic drop analysis for someone, what are you usually trying to find? What are your most common things that you usually go to? And do you have a way of attributing those things to the traffic drop? Because look, you can see a website, you can have an idea maybe what could be an issue, but you obviously never know until you do it, unless you've done it so many times that this is going to make at least something. I don't know if it's all of it, but it's going to be something. Like, can you walk me a little bit through your process of maybe looking at a website? And then maybe we can just, maybe on the technical side, and maybe then we can just go into content, how you assess content quality, now that we've been talking of it for a while.
So there are certain things that when you look at the website, you need to evaluate how there are two things to it. Like, and I always say this, a website is two things. It's a system that was designed to work in a certain way, and it's a system that people interact with. And not necessarily these two things are aligned. So how it was designed to work versus what people expect from it, and what people expect to interact, the behaviors, and what makes people kind of click around and navigate around. These two things might sometimes be aligned and sometimes might not be aligned. And when these things are not aligned is when you start to have problems, more often than not. Again, There's never like just a specific, there's never like a definitive. That's why in SEO, there's
Never
a lot
black and
of
white.
it depends as well. Yeah, because you have to assess two things. You have to assess a machine, a human, and how this content or this website is going to be used by two different systems. One system is a human system, the other system is a machine system. And you have to overlap these two systems in a way that they kind of, there is no like Venn diagram that's like very apart. It needs to kind of now overlap almost entirely. And you must expect that the parts that do not overlap are acceptable, that they should work that way. All right? Now, when things start not to overlap, you need to judge, is this by design? Is this by bad decisions that were made? Is this by some, and then you need to assess, okay, the way that it was implemented was a good way, given the resources that developers have available to them. If this is a bad outcome for Google, how can I fix it? How can I make this a better outcome for Google, knowing Google's limitations, but also dealing with the constraints and the limitations that the developers have? That's that's the thing. Like in SEO, a lot of people always have the ideal scenario where things should be, but there is never an ideal. There's the ideal scenario that it's your dream, but then there's the path to get there, and the path to get there is composed by trade-offs, and trade-offs is like effort that I need to do to make something good versus the goodness that I can make it versus the effort that I have to put into it, right? If these things are very disconnected, more often than not, you end up not making it because you don't want to do a lot of effort to have little gain. Or if you need to, suddenly throw a bomb into your website and you realize that you should have built it in a completely different way, which already happened. I came into websites that were pure single page applications that, what can you do with it? It's like you throw a bomb into it and you build something new. But then, like, that's the thing, right? You need to understand why the decisions that were made like this, and how can we, with the ingredients that were given to me, make the best soup that I can in terms of for Google to like the soup. Because if it doesn't like the soup, it's gonna, do what I just illustrated a while ago. So the first thing I look is like, are there parts of the website that are clearly, high volume, low effort in terms of produce a lot of trash, in terms of things that should not be exposed to search, but are these things exposed to search willingly or unwillingly? And then if they are unwillingly, what's the likelihood of minimal changes reverting this situation, or do I need a bigger effort? So you have to product manage a lot for Google, and you have to be an SEO is no more than a product manager for Google. Whereas you need to understand the criteria by which Google rewards a website, by which Google can extract information from a website, and then compare yourself to your competitors and say, we are doing a better job. We are, because we have more resources, because we have more knowledge, because we have more, SEO alone doesn't create any value. As an SEO, doesn't create any value on a website. If the value is, SEO is a magnifying glass. If the website is shit, you are going to magnify the shit that is there. And you're just going to expose it more. If your website is good, then you are going to magnify the good. So whatever is there needs to be valuable already to be exposed. Because SEO doesn't expose value. SEO tells how you can expose this value. If there is value, tap into the value and say, oh, with this valuable thing, knowledge, assets, whatever that we have, we can lay it like this on the website and Google is going to understand it. But if you have nothing to work with, if you have no raw material that is valuable to work with, then very likely SEO is not going to do any good for you. That's a lot. That's why I came across so many cases where people came to me and say, oh, my website was torched down. And then I look at their website and I go like, is this all? Do you have anything else that we can work with? And because their expectation is someone with an SEO knowledge is going to come and it's going to shift around the things, the same things, without adding much more, and expect that they have a different result with it, and that SEO is going to save their business. And more often than not, is like this is a complete illusion, because SEO doesn't save a business unless the business has value to be saved. So if there is nothing to be valuable, that to be exposed, SEO can do very little for you. I mean, if you have a product manager mindset, I consider myself a product manager more than an SEO sometimes, because probably of my background as well and what I studied. You can brainstorm with your clients or with your employer, with your teams, to tell them what valuable should look like, and then brainstorm with them to see where can we tap to extract value if we do not have any value. Because sometimes what happens is that there is value there, they just don't see it. And as an SEO, maybe you have the expertise to tap into it and see it, and then you say, oh, look at this. This is something that would work, because you can map it out, that how you would productify this in search, and you would make it work in search. But your discernment towards if this is valuable or not should be the first step. Not like, oh, the website is trash, but I'm going to rework the titles and descriptions. More often than not, it's not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, it's so important. Like I wish it was. SEO has done terrible as an industry to position itself,
Yes.
because I wish more people understood what, like, that side, the product side that SEO can bring from a business intelligence side, meaning like we can see what maybe where a business can tap into, but also how it can develop so it just can grow and just do better. Like I think the most impactful decisions that I have made have been in that sense. You should lean into this because people are really looking into it. Your product fits. You're currently not leading enough into it. And seeing a business transition in that direction and unlocking this massive market and going from, 2.5 mil a year to 15 or 20, because it wasn't just that, but they leaned into it. They had a product that was appropriate, and then they tweaked it as they had to sort of capitalize on those markets' expectations. And that has nothing to do with title tags or
Yeah.
anything like that. But people
I
don't
had a
see
client.
us many times as that. And I guess because most SEOs are maybe just focusing, I'll give you 1,000 backlinks, or I'll give you, or
Yeah.
I'll optimize your site to a score of 100%. Like I think we brought us on onto us. But it's
yeah, a lot of SEOs have the push button approach where they want to look at a dashboard or a tool, and the tool should tell them what they should do. And more often than not, this is a very finite and to some aspect low value. If your only job is looking at the tool and decide, you know, if something should be done or not based on what the tool tells you, you are replaceable by a tool. If you have a strategic approach where you could say, this doesn't have enough value to be part of search, or your business doesn't have value in search. Maybe it has value somewhere else, but search is not for not every business needs SEO, because not every business derives or extracts value from search. There are businesses like an app to call a taxi, right? What do you benefit from SEO? Who's going to search for an app for what you do on a search engine? You don't have search voice. You don't have demand for search. So why are you going to work on SEO for that and make up things? I had a client that came to me with a product that clearly had not been enough brainstormed to be sold to people. And the way that the client explained to me, not even I fully understood what they sold. And what I told them seemed like, listen, you do not need SEO at this stage. You need to go back to the drawing board and decide what actually is your product that you want to sell to your clients, and do a research on how your clients see this value. I mean, oh, Pedro, couldn't you look at keyword research? Yeah, and if your client doesn't have like volume enough to be on a keyword research tool, what if it's like a niche business or a very different business that is just like coming along? Are you gonna just do keyword research and tell you, oh, there are no keywords for you? Good news, I'm gonna make up some new ones taking out of my derriere, and I'll just make them out. No, I mean, you need to kind of, sorry, you need to be sensible and understand at what stage the business is in, what needs to be done, if it has voice in search or not, and then based on that, do your proper job of like, you know, act more like a strategy. Think that as like a strategist. You need to act more like someone that understands the pros and the cons and the value and the invaluable, and tap into the data and see what if there is hidden gems that could be surfaced. And if people understand, if there is some more often than not, the first thing that I ask when I come on board an employer or a business is do you have a user research team? Because I know if there's a user research team, there's a lot of data to play with. There's a lot of things to play with that I can map out to strategies and make work in search. Because what Google does is Google goes after users. And if we go after Google and you don't go after users, then you are one step behind. You are expecting Google to tell you what the users want before you found out what your users want. What you should be doing is that you should be going after your users, and then you'll be on par with Google because Google goes after your users, but you already know what your users want because you did user research. So you already have this corpus of data and strategic thinking to play with. And you don't find yourself like out of options because now you have like to be trying this and that in search to see if it sticks, if it works. So that's usually my approach and how I see things in SEO. And I think how SEOs have earned the bad reputations that everyone relies so much on tools and scripts and gimmicks and things that are finite in nature. And we do not see the forest for the trees. We do not. We only look at the, you know, we look at tactics. We look at things that are tactics and they are isolatable. We don't look at the whole big picture, and that's where most of SEOs lose themselves because they cannot bring. They stop being capable of bringing value to the table, and even like some business will stop being a, you know, this is not only the fault of SEOs, to be honest, right? Because as there are SEOs that do not have the capability of doing this, there are also businesses that they the way that they see SEO is very finite, and they expect this level of finiteness from an SEO consultant. And when someone like me starts to ask them about user research, and they start, why is he asking us about user research? Why he's not playing with keywords and titles and internal links? Because for me, that's not what SEO should be doing, only, right? I should be looking at keywords and titles and something when the stage of the product towards that to be the priority to be done. If I think that there are something else that needs to be done, then I'm going to start to poke around because I know that keyword research and titles and descriptions is not going to move the needle. And that's when I'm going to start, to try other avenues, and try to change sometimes the way of thinking that the business has around SEO. More often than not, it's successful, and they realize that I've managed to bring, put together teams in businesses to the point that I worked against myself to like, I'll help you put together a team that will understand these traits, and then I'll let you go if you want. I've been with clients for 2 years, 3 years, where I helped them put together, and they wanted to keep with me, and then some of them, went their own way. That's fine. I don't want to keep hostages. I want to keep happy clients that will come back to me someday when they need. But if my presence is no longer justified, if the client thinks that they are not in a period that they would not benefit from my presence, I mean, I'm not going to justify my time by, you have to upload this about every 6 weeks and, rewrite your unique meta descriptions and, go after things that are useless. That's not how I see SEO. And I prime to work that way because I don't want to give more bad naming to the industry.
Yeah. You sometimes need to get good clients to be able to do that too. They have to
Yes.
realize what's going on. Like so many, you said something, SEO doesn't save any business, and I don't think any marketing channel does. Like sometimes the
No,
business has a
you're right.
business issue that is pure operational about it, and it's very hard to fix. I remember this client that I worked with. It was a bus charter company, so you could a big group could rent a bus with a driver, and they would take them from one place to another. Let's say from the office to a conference or whatever, right? Or if a football team had a match, Manchester United went to Australia, they needed a bus to get to everywhere they were going. They would rent the bus from these guys, and they would put the Manchester logo and all that. And their business worked really well. They had terrible SEO mistakes uh, made by over the years by a couple of people, which they did have an SEO problem, but their biggest problem wasn't an SEO problem. It was a business problem because when they started, let's say 10 years ago, they don't own the buses. They get the buses from the local providers, and none of the local providers had websites. 10 years later, all the local providers have websites and they offer a
Yeah.
better price than they do because it's their bus. So now
Yeah.
they are not competitive because now everyone else has
Mm-hmm.
access to people.
Caught up
Whether
with
they
them.
started
Yeah.
10 years ago, they were the only ones with access and they were a massive business. But
Yeah.
the only way they solve that is by having a fleet of their own. They can't change the dynamic that they're in now. And that means having a completely different business. SEO won't fix that. There's no marketing of any kind that's going to fix that, because it eventually continues the same path that it's going. Even if you get them number one positions, yeah, they'll have more than now. But if spot number two has a 20% better price, it's hard to beat when it's such a service that isn't, where brand isn't really a big thing. They all look sort of the same. You just want a bus.
Yeah. There are two things essential for SEO to succeed. And basically, they derive one from each other. And the first, for you to understand also, and also to, sometimes evaluate yourself as a good professional, is also to understand that not everyone has good ideas, right? Not everyone can come up with a solid business idea or a good idea for what their business should be. And then when you try to save their idea, their bad idea with SEO, sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the times it doesn't work. And then consider also the fact that even the good ideas, if they are left untouched or stale for quite a while, quality degrades with time. People's expectations go up with time. People's as the web evolves, as more players come, as more people try to sell stuff, your expectations of the products you should buy, the quality of the website that you should interact with, your quality standards go up. Suddenly, if you were ported magically to 2005, and you would look at the websites at that time. I mean, go to Wayback Machine and go see some sites at that time, and ask yourself, if this website had been stuck in time since then, would it be still like a good website? If it is, it's probably a fantastic idea that nobody can, tap into, and nobody has that data except them. But more often than not, there are cases that are just marginal value. And if you don't keep on expanding that marginal value and working in it to keep your moat, your moat has to be big enough. And you need to keep it big enough to remain competitive, to remain appealing in the market. And if you stop doing that, at a certain point, the market will catch up with you. Your competitors will catch up with you, and your clients' expectations will surpass the ones that you can deliver, and that's when you die. And that no amount of SEO can save you. So these two things need to kind of, work together. A good idea cannot steal alone and stand alone for forever, and not everything is a good idea when it starts.
You work with massive clients, like you worked with eBay. I don't know if they're current or not. Mercado Libre, like it's
Yeah.
for people who don't know, it's like the Amazon of Latin America.
Yeah.
We use it all the time. It's the thing that has next day delivery and that type of stuff. What type of, how does that work look like? What type of work are you doing for them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there is a lot of two types of work that goes into these bigger players. One is efficiency work. Where can we gain efficiency? Because once you start to be really big, you start to have kinds of problems that are, Google can see it, or all website. Google has trouble getting to some areas, or Google is going to the areas that we don't want it to go. So there is some kind of efficiency work that needs to be done in there more often than not. The other side of the thing is what I was just telling you about, which is the product side of things, the qualitative right side of things. Is there untapped potential that can be brought into or repurposed into search? And more often than not, I ask these big clients to be involved in product meetings, in stand-ups, and stuff like this, because that's sometimes there are conversations that as a consultant, if I'm present, I can tap into the value that would otherwise would go unnoticed, because not everyone has the capability to recognize that something can be twisted and repurposed into search value. And I ask them to be included in stand-ups and product meetings because this, and there's a lot of SEOs that do not, because I mean, the default behavior of someone that looks for an SEO consultant is, I need to rank better in Google, so I'm gonna hire this person for a certain time and I expect them to give me some solutions. And I'm not gonna, they're just gonna do their audits, their reports, they're gonna give me a report of what they found from, and this is a picture of their current state. Like I take my picture of their website and I say, oh, this could be painted in another way. Another thing is that I go live with them for a period of time. And then I'm going to start to spot where are the deficiencies and where are the shortcomings and where are the decisions that are not made should have been made. And this is where the DNA changes. So more often than not, when a player is bigger, these things of taking a snapshot and doing an audit and delivering is very shallow. Anyone can do this. What not a lot of people can do is actually what I just tell, like go live with them for a period of time. Be embedded in meetings, even the ones that you think you should not be there, but you should be probably. And I learned this from when I was in Brazil. I spent 10 years in Brazil. And one of the clients that we had was McKinsey. And McKinsey would, at some projects that they had on their own, would bring us along to help them with the SEO part of their clients. So I learned a lot from this consulting behavior of going into the client and being within the client for periods of time, being within their teams and listening to meetings and being in meetings and working like a true consultant, basically, where the consultant should always have been and not just taking snapshots. And I understood that this is the valuable part of the work that should be done and needs to be done to actually bring value where sometimes value goes unnoticed. So yeah, there is certainly a lot of, technical and work that you can do by looking at the website and judging the systems but that's very finite. That's very shallow to some aspect. There's a clear begin, middle, and end to this. And sometimes that's the purpose, and that's totally fine. There are clients that would just want this. They don't want you embedded in their meetings. You don't have to. But if you want to prove value, and if your client is willing to have the mindset to be different and to, go to fight with another player that is bigger than them and they want to turn it around, and more often than not, this method of working is more needed than the snapshot kind of work. And, that's where kind of there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts in doing a better work unless you like really put the time into it. And more often than not, time is money. So clients need to invest into it and not see SEO for the finite game that it is. And if they want to real expressive results are real, to turn real tide meaningfully if they are in a bad spot.
This is quite important, and people shouldn't get wrong, like, or be mistaken that, for example, if you go and see a website and everything is client-side rendered, and the thing is a mess, like, yeah, there is value in fixing that and making sure that it's properly implemented and then checking that how things go over time and how Google responds to that. There is value to that too, but which can be massive, if you have a somewhat invisible website, make it just more visible or easier to see. But yeah, the other part is maybe where massive breakthroughs come through, that the client didn't know and you didn't know they were
Yeah,
possible because you had to go into that discovery mode and see what was going on from the inside. Hear that sentence is like, this is a thing, and then you come up with something.
yeah, exactly.
What are you doing something actively to prepare clients for AI? Are they asking for it? Like, how is that looking for you?
I'm doing the same that I always did for AI. I'm making sure that the things are retrievable without a lot of effort to be retrievable. You could arguably say that probably some content needs to be reworked, but that was never my remit. I never positioned myself as a content SEO. So I don't do content. I don't do content. I don't do links. I do product. I do technical work. So in that aspect, if a client comes to me for AI, I'm going to help them with the AI part, which is the part that is concerned about systems being able to retrieve its content. And then I'm going to evaluate probably how how its content is going to be ingested into these systems and the likelihood of it being like used as an answer. Like, is this like, look, does it look like citable content? Does it look like something that could be useful for an AI? If it's not, I'm not the one who's going to do the work to repurpose it. I'm probably going to work with someone um, on their team that is like more knowledgeable in content than I am. I'm going to give them the directions that I think should be given for their purpose. And, I'm going to make sure that I um, help them along the way, but I'm not going to be the one doing the work. This work is going to be done by someone that actually does the content part. If that's like an external consultant or someone within the team, that depends on the client. Um, More often than not, if a business is a really serious business, they will have someone in their own that produces the content, because there's no one better to produce content than someone that knows your business back and forth. So I always argue that to some aspect, some some content, especially the very specialized content, and not like just like shallow top of the funnel content, um, should have the hand of someone that is really an expert in their vertical. So more often than not, that is someone that is within the business. Um, that can be rewritten by someone who has a better writing skills. But the when I say content production, I say the people that dumps their brain into the content, not that the people that actually like lays out the content itself. So because I mean, laying the content is easy. Again, the hard part is the raw material, is the valuable. If you have like a very good understanding and a very good content, you can use an AI to help you like reorganize your content and kind of split it in paragraphs and write it better than I would, and then you can look at it and say, yes, it's still my content. It doesn't say any bullshit, so it's good to go. But you can't just like expect someone else to kind of be the brains instead of you. That would I would assume that. I mean, for any serious business. So I mean, I always had like a thing, like a word of caution against businesses that just do like content production and en masse. I've seen many go, and many of them that I see back in the day no longer exist for a reason. So yeah, it's not easy, but in a nutshell, um, an AI system is no more than a multi-step retrieval system, which does retrieval in 3 steps. Does retrieval for content ingestion to be trained on, does retrieval for grounding, and does probably retrieval for doing some kind of task or something that you ask it to do for you. It needs to retrieve content and um, be able to to produce the final output. So there are like, these are, and at every stage, every of these systems has their pros and cons, and you need to understand which those are to be able kind of, to do good work. But past that, not even the people that put the AIs together can explain why one word comes after another, let alone someone with a marketing dashboard. So
It's, we can just open a can of worms there because it's just
yes, please don't.
it's it's man, it's crazy. It's just crazy. Even the fact that it seems they built as an afterthought citations.
Mhm.
So that sort of means that the thing wants to say something from before and maybe it's just looking for citations to have something to link to. Maybe like like is it using like is it getting the answers from RAG right away all the time, or is it sometimes it's biased to say something at training and then it's just using its search capability just to find a source that agrees with what it wants to say before?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've read that multiple times across a lot of papers that the AI has a preconception of what it thinks is the right answer. And then the work that it does more often than not is to validate its assumption and rarely to contradict it. So more often than not, it ends up like being biased in the way that it was trained for. So um, there are some, you know, I, I don't know where I read a paper where it says that brands that are recognizable have way higher chances of being cited than a brand that is not, that just entered the market.
Yeah.
And if you think like that, if you don't do a proper work of being retrievable and being like expanding your footprint in terms of search, how can you compete with a system that doesn't even know that you exist unless it can, crawl you more and retrieve you more, and then um, to some extent know that you are cited across other places. I mean, this is all coming back to the old days of SEO. Like you need to kind of, be found, be cited, be relevant, and that builds up your reputation. Otherwise, but I think with these systems is even worse because these systems are trained on a isolated cutoff time. Whatever happens after, it doesn't know. It can probably do some RAG or grounding, but then it will have the bias to agree with itself. Um, so
Yeah. But it's so strange because it's one of those cases where it seems that two things are true simultaneously and it depends because, for
yeah,
example, I've seen for certain prompts, the prompts when grounding is involved, certain prompts, there's probably something that decides if it's going to be require some grounding just to check it's going to do that. And when it does that, I've seen people that do like PBNs, 100 articles with listicles, and it gets in there. Like it gets in there and it works. And it's like, how long is it going to work? That's a different thing, right?
yeah.
But even though it might have an initial bias, you can override it by volume. Um, and yeah, it's just
If you
it's
build the
messy
house on if you build the house on bunch of sticks, it probably works for a while.
for a while.
It's like it's this. I don't know. Like in Brazil, there are those slums, the favelas, where people build these houses that look like almost like a Tetris game, and sometimes things come down. They just like fall apart. And it's the same with whomever builds these things. You can start to build a house on a bunch of fragile sticks, and it will work for a while until it doesn't. So this, the work of making it strong and robust is depends on your willingness to maintain it or to improve it. So
I have to ask, because you said you're not a content person, but your content is incredible. Like, if anyone's listening, please go to visibly.com, and it's so well written, so well done. I just need to ask you, how are you doing it? Like, how are you outlining it? What's your process for writing that content?
so my process is like I have a bunch of loose concepts and of what I think how things should work. And I do exactly what I told you a while ago. I put them together, like I ask AI to paint me a scenario of that, of what it sees based on my thoughts, on how I think things should work. Then it paints me its vision. And then I mold it back. Then I say, no, this part that you are saying, it's like this, it's not, it should be like that. And I go piece by piece by piece, tweaking it. And so I use AI kind of, to mostly like to keep it in shape in terms of flow and readability. The parts that, that I'm not an expert on, I'm not an expert in probably like flow of readability and flash reading ease and these metrics that. So I use AI to help me with that, but the brain dump, the
Yeah.
knowledge is mine. I put my brain dump in there. I put the value in there, and then I read it over and over. And when I see something that doesn't make sense, I correct it and I ask it to go over it. And then I I collected a bunch of prompts that I use, like to kind of, lead it in the right direction, how I want it to write, how I what I want it to consider when it thinks, sources that I want it to consider, sources that I don't want it to consider. More often than not, I put a lot of things that, I did a lot of stuff where, do a research on X, Y, and Z and exclude any website that says SEO, that talks about SEO, because I don't because of if you do a research and if you don't exclude certain things that that are tend to be biased or are not accurate, you infer a lot of noise into the system, and then it kind of goes into the hallucinations and the things that end up in bad results. So there's value in saying to it what you want it to do, but there's also value of telling it what you don't want it to do. But one thing that you could not go without is your judgment in the end. So I always put my judgment into reading, saying, making sure it makes sense, making sure that I covered the every part that needs to be covered just enough that I don't go on a because I could make easily each of these articles twice or three times longer by expanding each, but I don't see that there's a sweet spot that you want to cut, talking about something to evolve into the next thing. And there's a lot of bad work that done by SEOs on this because everyone thinks that longer is better. So people just go at length extending their content to, until someone is tired from reading and gives up halfway, because you were not unable to keep it like concise, but you know cover all the aspects that you should be covering. So this is a lot of, I mean, does it do a lot of work for me? Yes. Does it make me to do more work? Yes. So the fact that I have to look at it thoroughly, the fact that I have to correct it here and there, the fact that I have to keep every paragraph in check, the fact that I have to keep every length of what it wrote in check, and make sure that it doesn't work with bad data. It's my what I'm concerned with.
Like, the benefit it's sometimes I think the benefit is it's easier to be an editor than to do from
Yes,
scratch. So that's where it's super useful because you see something and you know it's wrong, but then coming up with the whole thing might be harder.
yes.
How do you, but how do you, the part that I think is the hardest one is how do you decide, for example, you've got headings, right, that organize the content. How do you decide when when to leave something that's just going off topic too much? Like, do you think about those headings mostly with your brain? You're just going, oh, okay, this is what I want this to cover, and then maybe you ask the AI for some gaps, and if they're good, you put them in or not. How do you? My question is around boundaries because you have a boundary of what you explain within a heading, but you also have the boundary of what actual subtopic you include or you don't on that article. Because as you say, sometimes it's so easy that you could end up with a 20,000 word article that no one's going to read.
Yeah.
How do you go through that part?
So the part is like you need to clearly specify your remit. And your remit is often more done by your style of writing, like you want to be more a technical writer or you want to be more a creative writer. Is your audience more a marketing people or are they more product people? And this often starts to create a boundary of article purpose and length, because people that are in marketing, they consume content that has a certain nature and traits. People that are in product, like other type of approach, which is often more pragmatic, more technical. And you need to kind of be able to construct this cube, these boundaries of where the system should stop and not go on a tangent until forever, until the Big Bang happened. So because it's very easy to pick any article and go into it until you can go forever until like the birth of human race. um so that's the thing, you need to define your boundaries, but then you do that with practice, you do that with how painting a certain set of prompts. I i have i have huge sets of guidelines which go through content architecture, tone of voice, um, you name it, um, to say how the AI kind of should model the the outcome. Uh, and when I notice drifts, I go in and I tackle it, sometimes on my own. So if I see that if it's a recurring thing, I opt to fix it in a prompt. Um, Sometimes you don't want to fix it because sometimes the creative part of it, it's a benefit to you. Sometimes it comes off with things that you say, oh, like this is good. I wouldn't have included this if it wouldn't go on this tangent, but because it went, I spotted some value in this, and I'm going to weave it in another way. So there are things that you want to fix and some things that you don't. You don't want it to be very black, very boxed in a way that you don't give it any freedom, because then you lose the discoverable part of it, right? Like I mean, of course, I have a lot of things that I can think of to bring into an article and to write about and to include, but your mind is limited, and sometimes you are overwhelmed with the things that you already thought about until the AI spits something out that you were not thinking about, and then you say, "Oh, right, and this is a good point. I hadn't thought about this." Um, or you can say the complete opposite. This is total bullshit, and it's happening for a while, so I'm going to just patch it. Um, so you need to understand the benefits and of working with an AI as well, to be able like to not to completely um, shut it from the creative part that it could be. yeah, it's not a straightforward thing. It's not like that I just like select a model and go at it.
Oh no, oh no, that doesn't work. Yeah, yeah, especially the part about the raw materials. If you're depending on its raw materials, you're in trouble because it's not going to be good at all. Um, last
No, a
question.
lot of a lot of good ideas that I have sometimes just come from like I like to put white papers and study in research studies into AI and tell it like, explain me this from the perspective of someone that works on this vertical and does this, and what are the benefits? And it kind of, molds it down to your perspective. So sometimes it's easier to you to understand something that is very complex when it's put in light of what you are used to. It's suddenly easier for you to understand it. And this sometimes gives me good angles and good ideas to kind of, include or to explore myself and even to validate them on my own to make sure that they have legs. But um, yeah, I mean, I like to do discovery work, which kind of then feeds into my raw material that I can kind of, dump back into my drafts.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely good for understanding complex things, or at least giving you a gentle introduction to something,
Yeah.
or that angle that maybe you didn't come up with. Uh, last question, Pedro. What's what do you think is important right now that people aren't talking about enough? Where
What
are
I
we as
think
an
is
industry
important.
missing the mark? Where are we just not getting what we should be doing?
I think it's exactly, I've seen in, maybe we are, I don't know, I don't want to sound like a old man shouting at clouds, like, um, but I think that everyone is running too loose with automation. I think everyone is running like too, that automation is only good until you control the output, right? And that's how I use automation. That's how I use AI. I use AI to help me with Jira tickets. I help AI to help me do stuff that otherwise would be boring and repetitive, for which I can put a matrix behind. Um, but you should make it in a way that I don't think we are ready to have AI producing loads of amounts of unsupervised outputs and content, and then put your success depending on that. I've seen many people kind of shouting on social media, look what I've built. I built this website and there's like 100,000 pages and they're all AI. And, I doubt that you have looked at one fraction of those pages and judged the content of them. And I think this um, is where everyone is sitting atop Mount Dunning-Kruger and having more. Everyone is so certain of it, more than the doubts that they should have. And this applies also to what we are seeing in the marketing space, where we have, I don't know how many tools now that claim that can measure visibility in the outputs of these systems. And everyone is like so sure that this is kind of directional or anything. And it's like, so that the excuses that I've been hearing is like, oh, this is better than nothing. Yeah, I mean, trash is better than dying from hunger, right? But are you gonna bet your future on using this? I mean, I wouldn't use these systems to make decisions that are important for my business. You actually should use human judgment to do that. I mean, you can use these systems to kind of they can give you probably like a hint of how these systems are looking at you, but, and not even that. I mean, what all I know And what I can tell you with confidence, that now I have more questions than I have certainties. And what I see in the industry is the opposite, that people are more certain of themselves than they doubt themselves. And I think this is a very dangerous path to go towards. It's a dangerous path to go towards as professionals, because suddenly everyone starts to go after the herd, saying, "Oh, this is the path, this is the way, this is," and nobody questions. Nobody questions anything. I mean, I see all, conferences where nobody questions what's being put out as touted as results and touted as, and this in these sales pitches that these companies do to businesses, the hard questions are silent. I don't see anyone asking the hard questions. How do you deal with the data that is not representative? How do you deal with personalization? So far, everyone has a bunch of bollocks around personalization. They say that, oh, we can script the front end and the results, and we can put it together with the API. But the only thing that you can do some studies, what some folks are doing with measuring selection rate. Like if you can measure how often you are selected for an answer. That's the something that you can have so far.
Seems
A,
Dan
a
Petrovic's
number that
words.
is representative, that a rate. What you can do with it, if increasing it is good, maybe it is. How do you increase it? You have to experiment. There are no because so far, no one no, and I say this because so far not even the people who put these things together can explain the sequence of this, why one token happens after the other. They don't know. They don't know. Karpathy told himself that they are surprised that this even worked. How do you deal with this with this information? I mean, if they are themselves surprised that this even worked, I mean, are we so confident that we can explain how the system works? Like I said, I have more questions, and that's the dangers that I see we going in as in this industry. Because if we had problems with being credible as professionals, because there are always the manipulative side of things, uh, and black hat spam, and I don't even call it black hat SEO, because black hat is for me it's spam. And so, I mean, I don't think there's any benefit in showing to the market that I'm very certain of something that has no certainty behind. And I'd rather be on the voicing my questions and being the guy that's always with inconvenient than kind of agreeing with the tools just to be put at stages at conferences. I don't need to go to conferences. So here I am making noise.
I think I've lost a couple of clients, not clients, but like prospects that didn't become clients because they asked about AI. And I said that I wasn't sure, that we were still figuring this out, that there were things that we knew, but things that we didn't. And that we should
Sure, I
also
lost.
consider if it's for you too, because maybe it's not even for you.
Yeah, I'm sure I was rejected from interviews and from that, because I said, it doesn't differ very much from search engines. And because the expectations that people want to hear on the other side is that someone kind of has this Dunning-Kruger certainty that, rewarded that there is something until there isn't. Because, this,
They've also done a great job at saying that anyone who says that it's pretty much like SEO is someone that doesn't understand it, that is
Mhm.
old school
Yeah,
and being left behind. Like that's specifically how it's been framed. And I think there is truth that there is a certain aspect that wouldn't be a priority for SEO, or maybe you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's a 10% or whatever that is. Maybe it's 15. I don't know. We don't even know that, but there's a huge
Yeah.
chunk that is. And maybe the confusion also comes from what you mean by SEO is not the same thing that I mean by SEO, or that
Yeah.
the next person next to us means by SEO. Because, you know, for someone doing SEO was just doing the title tags or launching blogs and it was nothing else. But for someone else, it might have been like actually trying to understand user intent to the point that you're putting different contexts, perspectives, angles, everything that requires a piece of content to sort of satisfy that user, which is sort of what is being said now, and having paragraphs that are self-sustaining and things like that. Like people were doing that before,
You should always be doing
but
that.
but not everyone. So it's sort of
Yeah.
like people rediscovered or just defined how SEO should have been all the time.
Yeah. So it's maybe that it's not the case that some people do not understand it. Is that some people never understood it in the first place.
But they're just realizing what's going on or what should have gone
Yeah.
on. Pedro, this has been a wonderful conversation. If people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I post the most, probably. Like I'm there. Just search for my name. They can find me on Twitter, X, which is at Pedro Dias. And those are mostly the two places where I voice my concerns. I have a Substack that I write, which is called The Inference, theinference.io. And my business is visibly.com. I act as an independent consultant. And that's it. That's it for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me again. It was a pleasure.